as of March 2026, the official limit on a single contactless payment has been lifted. The previous £100 limit introduced in October 2021 has now been scrapped. Now, on the face of it, this seems like absolutely brilliant news. We can now get out to the shops and spend as much as we'd like without having to worry about using a PIN, right? Well, not so fast, because you see, it turns out that Britain's banks have decided, at least for now, to keep the current £100 ceiling in place. But why? So, UK Finance, the banking lobby group, said that banks were holding off on immediate changes to the contactless limit because there was no widespread consumer demand, and that card terminals in shops would need to be altered to allow for larger contactless payments. Now, I find this absolutely fascinating, so let's dive into this a bit deeper. The latter point here about card terminals needing to be altered makes complete sense to me. A similar thing happened when the £100 limit came in. It took quite a bit of time for shops to adjust to the new limit back then, so there wasn't an immediate rush for the limit to be raised. That's completely fine. The first point, however, about a lack of widespread consumer demand for an unlimited cap, I do find quite curious. Now, maybe this is just me in my London metropolitan bubble, but I would have assumed that people would be clamouring to be able to spend more via contactless, maybe because I see so much of it in London, on the tube and stuff like that. It's just so easy to be able to use your contactless payment card or your phone to pay for stuff rather than using a PIN. But actually, when you look into the data, the story is a bit more nuanced. I did a bit of digging into UK Finance's data on this, and it reveals some quite interesting insights. So you've got the usual stuff like contactless being by far the most popular way to pay. Almost 160 million contactless debit and credit cards are in issue at the moment. But the key point, which I think explains the argument about low consumer demand, is this. The average value of a contactless payment is currently just under £18. £18. That to me is absolutely striking, considering the fact that the limit was set to £20 in 2012, but the average value of a single payment hasn't risen in line with the successive lifting of the limit. Now again, this isn't a point about the popularity of contactless payments. 19.2 billion contactless debit and credit card transactions were made in 2025, totaling a value of £311 billion. But the fact that the average spend on a single transaction is £18 does explain why there may be less consumer demand for an unlimited cap than you might expect, hence the banks moving a little bit more slowly on lifting it. So let's now talk about why the cap is being lifted in the first place, and to do that we have to mention the Financial Conduct Authority. It is the UK banking regulator. They set the rules for all things contactless, and it says that removing the cap will allow banks to better respond to changing consumer demands, inflation and new technology. Now, in making this decision, the FCA is also making a huge push for flexibility. This is for the banks, so that they can set their own limits on how much they want to let people spend on contactless, but also for individual consumers. The FCA is really pushing banks to communicate with customers about how they can set their own limits for spending and even turning contactless off entirely. The other factor that is always raised in any debate about contactless payments is the issue of fraud. What happens if someone nicks my card? Are they now going to be able to spend hundreds, even thousands of pounds in one fell swoop? Well, the FCA has made absolutely crystal clear that banks and payment providers must have strong fraud controls when processing contactless transactions. It argues that the greater flexibility provided would incentivize firms to step up their fraud prevention, giving consumers greater protection and peace of mind. Now, UK Finance does say that cases of contactless fraud are quite rare, around 1.2 pence for every £100 of transactions. And don't forget that there are existing consumer protections in place against fraudulent activity. Banks must reimburse you for any unauthorized payments that are made from your card, and there are also background limits too for the number of times that you can use contactless payment before you're made to enter a PIN number. The final component in all of this, and what I would argue is the most important, is the use of digital wallets, because there is no limit on the amount you can spend using a digital wallet on your smartphone. This includes Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, etc. Why is that? Because biometrics are involved. If you have an iPhone, just like me, you have to use either Face ID or Touch ID to authenticate that payment. If you have an Apple Watch, you'll be wearing it and you'll have used your iPhone in most cases to unlock that Apple Watch. So it is really, really secure. I personally use Apple Pay for 99% of all of my spending. Last time I spoke about this issue on this channel about 5 years ago, I said that the only thing that I used cash for was getting my hair cut. It is exactly the same to this day, 5 years later. If it wasn't for that, I would be using Apple Pay 100%. Also, don't you just find cash to be really disgusting? Like, I'm a bit of a germaphobe, so I hate touching things in general, but cash that other people have touched, shop workers who have been stood there all day handling different people's cash, I mean, you have no idea where people's hands have gone. I mean, I just can't even imagine how disgusting these notes and these coins are. Like, ugh, it creeps me out. I just could not imagine going back to using cash. It's just not for me. Contactless all the way. But the really key thing about digital wallets is that not only does it make it more convenient to spend however much you like, but it simultaneously tackles the issue of fraud. Because if somebody nicks your iPhone, they can't go around spending money willy-nilly. The worst they can do is maybe pay for a few bus fares, a few tube fares, using the express feature. That's very handy. That's about as much as they can do. You will not be seeing hundreds or thousands of pounds leaving your account, which is the most important thing in that scenario.